Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the NewsHour tonight, President Trump charges ahead with his agenda, reshaping U.S. foreign policy, sending more migrants to Guantanamo, and pushing out more government workers.
While Israel's prime minister is in Washington, displaced Gazans are returning home. We speak with the United Nations top humanitarian official about the situation.
The biggest need we have right now is hold that ceasefire open. Every day the ceasefire lasts, we're saving lives.
And hiring slows, but the unemployment rate ticks down. What the latest jobs report means for the U.S. economy.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation, the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad.
Cunard is a proud supporter of public television. On a voyage with Cunard, the world awaits. A world of flavor, diverse destinations, and immersive experiences. A world of leisure and British style. All with Cunard's White Star service.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org.
And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Courts and Congress are struggling to keep up with the breakneck pace set by the Trump administration as it dramatically reshapes the American government, national politics, and the international order.
Today, President Trump promised more cuts and more political payback, even as the court stepped in to at least temporarily stand in the way of big changes he put in motion days ago. Lisa Desjardins starts our coverage.
Thank you very much.
Standing next to the Prime Minister of Japan, a question about how President Trump uses power. He was asked, will he fire every FBI agent who investigated the January 6th assault?
No, but I'll fire some of them because some of them were corrupt.
Trump later seemed to clarify that he wanted to fire corrupt agents, and that could be those involved in January 6th. This as FBI agents involved saw a win. The Department of Justice agreed not to release the list of agents who worked on January 6th cases without 2 days' notice. A court case around the list will continue in the meanwhile. That news coming as Mr. Trump welcomed Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, the second foreign leader to visit the White House since Trump has returned. A world to discuss: North Korea, China, tariffs, and the future of U.S. steel.
Have you changed your mind about the sale of U.S. Steel?
No, I haven't.
U.S. Steel, a Pittsburgh icon, has struggled of late. Japan's Nippon Steel wants to buy it, but was blocked last month by then-President Joe Biden. Trump so far has agreed no sale, but today promised an investment deal is to come.
They're doing it as an investment, no longer a purchase.
Okay.
I didn't want it purchased, but investment I love.
As he extends a hand to some, Trump and efficiency czar Elon Musk are working overtime to push government workers out and literally chip away their agencies. Workers dismantled the agency sign at what was USAID. Leadership has been told as few as 300 workers total may be all that are allowed to continue. Trump was asked about Musk, including his request for access across government.
We have very smart people going in, so I've instructed him go into education, go into military, go into other things as we go along. And they're finding massive amounts of fraud, abuse, waste, all of these things. So, but I will pick out a target and I say go in.
Elsewhere,
We're members of Congress. Let us in.
Democratic members of Congress were turned away at another agency where they said they had unanswered questions. On Capitol Hill,
where is your bill? Where's your budget proposal?
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and other Democrats are stepping up criticism of Trump and Republicans who have not come up with their draft for a critical budget deal. And they say are ignoring funding problems for Head Start, community health centers, and the sudden unraveling of USAID.
Republicans did that. And Republicans in Congress are doing nothing to stop this chaos.
But Republicans, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, who was at the White House yesterday, say they are honing in on major legislation, and Trump is getting things done. That includes 1,500 more active duty troops that the Pentagon said it's sending to the southern border to block new migrants from crossing into the country. Also, as part of Trump's agenda on immigration, today Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem posted that she was heading to Guantanamo Bay facilities, where the administration has sent plane loads of undocumented migrants. The ACLU is suing for information and access to assess their treatment. As Republicans see a president who turns out new actions every day, his critics look increasingly to courts to slow him down.
And we have seen court action in just the past hour or so. A federal judge has at least partially blocked the administration's attempted purge at USAID, a move that will protect thousands of workers there. Judge Carl Nichols, a Trump appointee, said that his ruling will hold while other legal matters, lawsuits about that continue. He called his ruling a temporary limited pause.
So some late-breaking news there, Lisa. We also heard President Trump talk more about the mandate he says that he's given Elon Musk. We heard him say that Elon Musk has unearthed fraud across the federal government. They provided no evidence of that. But walk us through your reporting.
Right. This was an important moment, I think, in everything that's happening when Trump was asked about these questions. First of all, this was public permission by the president that Musk basically can go almost anywhere. I also want to point out that President Trump specifically mentioned two areas. One, the military, which we hadn't heard that Musk might be trying to access military issues before, and also education. Now, the court has limited Musk's team's access to Treasury because of a lawsuit there, but we don't know if Musk's team is following that court order. As for evidence, if you look at Musk's posts on his X social media, he is constantly posting examples. For example, today he talked about leases that he says the government is no longer using for empty space. He talks a lot about DEI initiatives that he says contracts that they've closed. But one of the issues here is that all of this is being done in the dark. We don't know exactly who's making these decisions, which contracts are exactly problematic, which ones aren't, and a lot of these agencies themselves don't know as well.
Let's shift our focus to Capitol Hill. Overall, where does the push stand for major Trump-backed legislation?
Yeah, that's right. Well, believe it or not, putting together what might be the most complex and large bill in recent history, turns out it's harder than you might predict. So Republicans are actually having a hard time getting out of the starting gate with this massive Trump bill. What we know right now is that the House Republicans met at the White House last night to try and figure out their first starting point, which is a budget resolution. Here's Speaker Johnson talking to reporters after that meeting.
Our message to our friends and colleagues in the Senate is allow the House to do its work. We are moving this as quickly and as expeditiously as possible, but it's very close, and I think probably by tonight we wrap it all up.
Okay, that was last night, Jeff. It's a day later. We still don't have the budget resolution. It's hard to do these things, and they have missed their initial deadline at least.
So what are Republicans trying to accomplish here? What are the stakes?
All right, we're going to talk a lot about this in coming days, but here's a reminder. It's big. It's an ambitious agenda. First of all, let's take a look at what Republicans want to achieve here. At the top of that list, they want to extend the tax cuts passed in the first Trump term of office, but they want to expand those tax cuts potentially in a lot of different directions. That's part of the debate here. At the same time, they want to cut the deficit. Those two things, both of which are hard to do together, and of course, significant border and homeland security measures. A lot of money here involved, and making all that fit into a package that reduces the deficit the math is very hard.
So what determines whether Republicans can actually get this done?
Yeah, I want our viewers to be able to know sort of the players here that are the most important. And one of the issues here is the House wants to do it one way. They want one giant bill with everything in it. The Senate says, no, let's just get small things done, first of all, including border security. So the House, on that side, you see Speaker Johnson, and then Ways and Means Chair, the Tax Committee, Jason Smith. Now, opposing them and how to go about this really are Senate new Majority Leader John Thune and Lindsey Graham. He's now the chairman of the Budget Committee, and both of them actually, while the House was supposed to move this week, they couldn't get it together. The Senate went ahead and moved its budget resolution, which is something that Trump has not really reined in on. He's meeting with senators this weekend. He met with the House members last night, but he's not making a decision, and they're trying to let them figure it out. They're not. So one problem for Republicans is that they can't even figure out which direction they want to go to get to this ultimate goal yet.
Lisa Desjardins, you have such a way of simplifying all of the confusing stuff. We're grateful for your insights and your reporting. Thank you.
In the day's other headlines, deadly storms are sweeping across the United States from one coast to the other. In California, floodwaters inundated roads, killing at least 2 people in Sonoma County, where heavy rains triggered landslides and destroyed homes. Farther east, a possible tornado ripped through eastern Tennessee late last night. Officials confirmed 2 lives were claimed in that storm as well.
Roads will be blocked, power lines are down, there's still safety issues going on. And just ask people to pray for this community again as they go through these tragic times and the people that lost their life.
In the Pacific Northwest, more peaceful scenes. Snow blanketed the dense forests of southern Oregon, and that winter weather is headed east and poised to affect millions. Forecasters say snow and freezing rain is traversing the northern states and will reach New England by Sunday. More than a foot of snow could fall in parts of the Northeast. U.S. job growth slowed last month, but still signaled a labor market on solid footing. The first jobs report of President Trump's second presidency showed U.S. employers added 143,000 jobs in January. That is the lowest number since October and short of predictions that were around 170,000. The unemployment rate fell to 4%, which experts say may lead the Federal Reserve to hold off on cutting interest rates until at least June. Turning overseas, a small plane this morning crashed in the middle of a busy road in Sao Paulo, Brazil, shortly after taking off from a private airport nearby. Both the pilot and plane's owner on board were killed, and at least 6 others on the ground were injured. Pieces of the wreckage hit a bus and a motorcyclist, but the crash just missed a crowded intersection and a long line of waiting cars. The cause of the crash is not yet known. Sources on the ground in Sudan tell the New York Times that hundreds of people have been killed in recent days as fighting escalates in the country's civil war. The UN reported this week at least 80 deaths in the southern city of Kadugli. Residents there say they don't have access to food or medicine. As the civil war approaches its 3rd year, the Sudanese army and rival rapid support forces have also clashed in the capital of Khartoum and in Omdurman, Sudan's 2nd largest city. The UN says at least 40 children were among those killed just this month. In Sweden, government officials say they will work to tighten gun laws after the deadliest mass shooting in the country's history. Swedes are still in shock after a gunman killed 10 people and himself at a school for adults in the city of Örebro earlier this week. Authorities believe the shooter used several of his own licensed rifles. Sweden's prime minister said he wants to restrict assault-style rifles and toughen the process for obtaining a license.
It's about tightening regulations for getting a weapons license at all. It's about banning certain types of semi-automatic weapons. We're also adding a proposal that would allow police and social services better opportunities to investigate medical reasons that would deny a person a gun license.
Police are still looking into whether the suspected gunman may have been a student once at the education center he attacked. They're still searching for a motive. Back here at home, this may be, by one measure, the most intense winter flu season in the last 15 years. The CDC says the percentage of visits to doctors' offices due to flu-like symptoms was higher last week than the peak of any winter flu season since 2010. Flu season typically peaks around February, and the CDC estimates at least 24 million flu cases this season so far. At the same time, CDC models show both COVID-19 and other respiratory illness, RSV, on the decline. And markets slid today on the heels of those lower than expected jobs numbers, as well as concerns about tariffs and inflation. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped nearly 450 points, its worst day in almost 4 weeks. The Nasdaq headed to a market-leading loss of 1.4%. The S&P 500 wiped out its modest gains on the week. Still to come on the News Hour, Jonathan Capehart and Matthew Continetti weigh in on the week's political headlines. Ahead of the Super Bowl, the boom in legal sports betting. And longtime chef Lawrence Chu gives his brief but spectacular take on treating every day like a grand opening.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein Studio at WETA in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
President Trump said today that he's in, quote, no rush to do anything in Gaza. Earlier this week, he talked about the need for Palestinians to leave Gaza, calling it a demolition zone, and for the U.S. to take over the area and develop it.
Meanwhile, Hamas is accusing Israel of delaying aid deliveries that were agreed to in the ceasefire deal, an accusation Israel denies. Stephanie Tsai has this report with the latest.
500,000 families streaming back to their homes in Gaza, on foot, on piggyback, children in tow. For more than a year, their home, a battleground in the Israel-Hamas war. They survived, while many did not. But their apartments, their businesses, everything that makes a community are in ruins. Amidst the destruction, rescue workers and families dig, trying to locate the remains of loved ones. Bones are taken to the local morgue in the hopes that they can be identified in the future. Nearly 2 million Gazans are still displaced, sheltering in makeshift tents while winter's bitter elements beat down upon them and temperatures drop. Kakab Hamouda's tent housing her and her children collapsed in the strong winds.
Something like an earthquake occurred and the wood collapsed on us. I have 2 children in the hospital. One of them had 2 stitches in his head and the other was injured by this metal rod which fell on him.
She recalls a previous life of comfort and dignity long gone.
We are dying. We have no food. Look at the tent. I do not have money to buy them food. I was living decently and comfortably in the north. Who can I turn to now? To whom?
Nearly 91% of Gazans are projected to suffer from acute food insecurity this year. And according to UN estimates, over 60,000 children will need treatment for acute malnutrition in 2025. Gaza's residents have long relied on food assistance. Prior to the war, the UN was sending an average of 500 trucks of aid a day. During the war, those deliveries became scarce and sporadic. To make matters worse, armed looters have targeted aid trucks in hundreds of cases, further threatening the survival of Gaza's civilians. In one desperate scene, IDF soldiers began shooting into a crowd waiting for aid to be dispersed. 112 people were killed. Since the ceasefire began, thousands of trucks with food, medicine, and tents have arrived in Gaza. But the future of its residents may lie in the hands of politicians, diplomats, and dealmakers far away. Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives Mike Johnson and Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu met in Washington today, days after President Donald Trump proposed to relocate all Gazans in Jordan and Egypt, a proposal which Johnson has backed as a logical move. The plan has been roundly rejected by those countries' leaders and the Palestinians themselves, who want to stay in their homeland, shattered as it is. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Sy.
One of the key agencies overseeing the provision of aid into Gaza is the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Earlier today, I spoke with its leader, Tom Fletcher, who was in Gaza earlier today and joined us from Jerusalem. You were in Gaza earlier today. What did you witness, especially in the areas that were harder to reach due to the fighting?
Well, thanks. I came in through the north, which is the area worst affected by the conflict of the last 14, 15 months. And it's desolate and it's been pummeled. You can't tell what was a house, what was a school, what was a hospital. And you see civilians picking through the wreckage, returning to their homes. And it takes them time to even find where their homes were because everything has been flattened. So it's grim, it's desolate, but they are heading home and they are trying to rebuild.
Parts of northern Gaza were on the brink of famine. What's the situation now?
They were. So 2.5 weeks ago, when we got the ceasefire in place, we were very, very worried about starvation levels and famine. We've now got 2.5 weeks of trucks, convoys, almost 14,000 trucks have gone in that time. So we've made progress in getting food to those who need it, to the survivors. And the risk is receding of famine. We've got food to 1 million people, but the needs are still massive. I'd say the biggest needs right now are tents, shelter, because a lot of people are trying to head back to where their homes were, and winter is here. It's very, very cold, wintry conditions. So we've got to get them something to sleep under.
And what challenges remain when it comes to distributing that aid, given just the sheer scale of desperation and need?
Well, you're right. It's the scale that is so significant, that is so massive. I've been in Sudan recently, in Darfur. I've been in on the Ukrainian front lines. I've been across Syria, and nothing matches what we're trying to do in Gaza right now. The good news, though, is that since the ceasefire, and this is credit to everyone who got that ceasefire in place, it's become much, much easier to shift in 600, 700 trucks every day of life-saving equipment. So the biggest need we have right now is hold that ceasefire open. Every day the ceasefire lasts, we're saving lives.
Israel, as you well know, has passed a law banning UNRWA from operating within Gaza. What has been the impact of that, and is that organization still distributing aid?
So UNRWA is the largest of the UN operations working in Gaza, and it's absolutely indispensable. It's the backbone of that operation, and particularly in the education and health sectors where it takes the lead. And no other agency, no other UN agency, no other organization, frankly, including the Palestinian Authority, can step in and can deliver education at that scale. But of course, UNRWA is also operating in Jordan, Lebanon, across the region, and those operations are continuing unimpeded.
In the meantime, the Trump administration is in the process of hollowing out USAID. What might be the effect of that in Gaza?
Well, I don't think you build a golden age by retreating from the world. The US has been an incredibly generous, a humanitarian superpower for decades now. It's led the world, almost half of some of the humanitarian campaigns funded by the Americans. And I think, Americans are right to ask us to be more efficient, more innovative, to make sure that more of that aid reaches the people who need it so badly. But without that support, and I hope this is only a temporary freeze, we won't reach tens of millions of people who in the past have been supported by the generosity of the American government and ultimately the American people.
How are Gazans and the regional stakeholders to whom you've spoken, how are they responding to President Trump's idea for the U.S. to take ownership of Gaza for its reconstruction? He's also suggested that Gaza should be emptied of its population. How is the region responding to that?
So, most of them right now are searching through the rubble for their family members, for their loved ones. So that's what they're thinking about. They're thinking about the next meal. They're trying to stay warm. But everyone mentioned it to me. And what they all say is, firstly, tell our story. Get the media in. Someone has to see what's happened to us. The second thing they say is, will someone ask us? They feel that no one's actually consulted them on this plan. And, they're the ones who are being threatened with this movement, with being displaced once again. And then the third thing they say is, this is the land we were born in. These are the homes that our parents and grandparents built we've been displaced so many times and we keep on rebuilding, and they're going back. There's a defiance there. They're determined to survive, and they're determined to survive on their own land.
A defiance and a determination. Tom Fletcher, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Today's jobs report not only showed the pace of hiring slowed slightly in January, adding 143,000 jobs, it also revised down jobs numbers between April of 2023 and March of 2024 by nearly 600,000, the largest annual revision in 15 years. To help us make sense of all of this, we're joined now by Austan Goolsbee, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. Austan, welcome back to the NewsHour. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's start with today's numbers, shall we? 143,000 jobs added, a bit lower than expected. We also saw unemployment tick down to 4%. Wages also rose 4.1% from the prior year. What do all these numbers put together say to you about where we are?
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers, and you always want to be careful over-indexing on 1 month. Remember that the payroll jobs created number is plus or minus around 100,000. So it was 150,000 plus or minus 100,000. I think most measures of the job market have been pretty solid, and they're largely saying the economy's kind of settled in at something like full employment. Always in January, you have these big revisions, and this was the biggest revision in some time looking back on the previous year. But we've had a lot of variability. Just the last month's number got revised way up. So we're just going to have to look for the through line and not overreact to any 1 month.
And that big revision down, though, there's some technical reasons here as well. But does it overall in any way say to you that maybe the economy's actually been growing much more slowly than we'd previously thought?
I don't think so, because, as I say, we have a lot of measures of the job market, the unemployment rate, the number of jobs. We can look at the ratio of how many job vacancies there are to how many unemployed workers there are, hiring rates, quit rates, are there layoffs? And by taking the totality of those measures, it looks to pretty much be a kind of a stable arrangement. That said, I do think we had the experience over the year, because this recovery has been so much different coming out of COVID than in previous recoveries. A lot of the adjustments that the Bureau of Labor Statistics has to do to when it comes up with the numbers, as they got the real data, they led to bigger revisions than we normally have.
So let's talk about what all this could mean for the future. Obviously, you and your colleagues at the Fed watch all of this very closely. You are a voting member this year. We've seen inflation trending down. It hasn't quite hit that 2% target we know the Fed wants to see. And the next decision, we believe, on interest rate cuts could be on March 19th. So as of today, where are you on the possibility of a rate cut?
Well, I've been saying, I said in the summer that I thought where we were going to end up in the relatively near future, let's call it 1 to 1.5 years, was the rates would come down because the economy was looking pretty solid. The job market had settled in about where we thought it would settle, that inflation was coming down to 2%. And we then cut a full percentage point off of rates. And now if we slow the pace of how fast the rates cuts come, that would make sense to me because we're getting closer to the stopping point. But I still think that if you take the through line and we can get around some of these policy uncertainties, I still think we're over the next year to year and a half that rates be trending down.
But you're saying slowing on the pace of those, so likely no rate cut ahead on the next decision day?
Yeah, I don't like tying our hands when we still got a lot of information to get before the next meeting. But at the last meeting, I said it makes sense to me as we're getting to this spot where we need to figure out and feel our way toward what in our language we call neutral. We're going to feel our way to neutral. It makes sense to slow down how rapidly you're doing that, because monetary policy's impact on the economy comes with a lag. It doesn't all just happen instantaneously, so you can't just jam it and then hope it's right.
You mentioned some of the uncertainty ahead. I've got a little over a minute left here, but I want to get your take on this because there's a lot of new proposals and new policies we've seen from this administration on things that could impact the workforce or trade in dramatic ways. When you look at deportations ramping up, immigration crackdown, potential tariffs on major trading partners. How are you looking at those, and do you see any of those as potentially inflationary?
Yeah, some of those could clearly be inflationary. You've got others, deregulations. We've had a high productivity growth rate. Some of them that would be disinflationary. I kind of have, my view has been, we want to get a through line, and this is adding a kind of dust in the air and making it harder to see. So I think unless we get to, and at the point where we get to resolving some of these policy uncertainties that might muddy our index of, if you see inflation progress stalling or even going back up, is that because the economy is overheating, in which case the Fed would be primed to act, or is that because of some of these policy things that might just be temporary? That's going to be a tough spot for the Fed to try to disentangle. And so that just emphasizes slowing down the pace at which it's going even more.
Austan Goolsbee, President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. Thank you so much. Good to speak with you.
Yeah, great to see you again.
From Elon Musk gaining unprecedented access to sensitive government information to Democrats trying to build what they call a bigger and better party, we turn tonight to the analysis of Capehart and Continetti. That's Washington Post Associate Editor Jonathan Capehart and Matthew Continetti with the American Enterprise Institute. David Brooks is away this evening. It's good to see you both.
Good to see you.
So Donald Trump and his allies are making quick progress toward their stated goal of the deconstruction of the administrative state. We've got takeovers and the hollowing out of major government agencies, offering severance agreements to government workers, pausing federal grants and loans, which of course is now tied up in the courts. Jonathan, are the shockwaves being felt across the government signs of a super committed new administration shaking up the status quo? Or are we witnessing the full assault on the limits of executive power?
Both, Jeff, both. Remember, Donald Trump campaigned. He told us this is what he was going to do. Project 2025 is all about doing what is happening right now. And so they are trying to deconstruct, as I think it's Steve Bannon who said, the administrative state. And they are, as I said last week, President Trump and Elon Musk in particular are taking a wrecking ball to the federal government by sowing, sure, chaos and confusion and fear. But he's following through on what he promised to do.
How do you see it, Matt?
I think Jonathan's right. This was a promise made, promise kept, as they like to say in Trump world. And I think what's important to understand about Trump and how he's going about these initial weeks is he wants to deliver results. Trump always feels as though the political class that preceded him talked a big game but never accomplished anything. So we had the Grace Commission during Reagan. We had Al Gore's reinventing government. We had the commissions dealing with the debt and taxes during the Obama years. Nothing happened. And so here he is. If Elon Musk says he wants to treat the federal government like a new acquisition, well, Donald Trump says, go for it. Let's see what happens.
What about the question Democrats are raising, Jonathan? Where are the guardrails? Who's going to stop any of this? Democrats in Congress obviously don't have any power. Republicans in Congress are moving in lockstep with this administration. The courts have stepped in where they deem appropriate, but obviously can't keep up with the velocity of the Trump administration. Is there any guard against his instinct to really claim and wield expansive power?
Well, see, here's the thing. Right now, the courts are the only guardrail. And I think people need to understand that the courts operate on a timetable that is completely different than the rest of us. And we just have to appreciate that. The fact that citizens and lawmakers and organizations have gone to court to stop President Trump on a whole host of things, from birthright citizenship to the buyout plans, that is right now sort of the, for lack of a better saying, court of last resort. In the old days, Jeff and Matthew, it used to be that Congress would be the backstop, would be the entity, the legislative branch, standing up for its prerogatives and saying, Mr. President, no, we are the ones who decide what agencies come and go. We are the ones who decide what the budget will be. But instead, the MAGA Republicans who were there in Congress, from Speaker Johnson on down, they're happy. They're happy to go along with what President Trump and Elon Musk are doing, which is why they are silent on a whole host of things that even 10 years ago would have had Congress up in arms.
How do you view Congress really abdicating their role, ceding their power to the executive?
Well, I think this process of ceding power to the executive is decades in the making, and it's bipartisan. Congress has really just become an investigatory body that delegates tremendous authority to the executive branch of government and the bureaucracy. And what we now see the results when you have Trump come in his second term, wanting to leave a profoundly changed government in his wake when he departs the Oval Office. And you see that because of acts of Congress, Congress's own denial of its role, the president has enormous power to wield. And let's remember, when President Obama said he had a pen and a phone, the first Trump administration used a lot of executive orders. Joe Biden tried to cancel student debt through executive order. This process we're seeing is long in the making, and I think one reason Washington is stunned is that you have an outsider in Elon Musk actually punching the delete button on some of these programs.
Jonathan, Matthew raised the question I was going to ask you, because that's what I've heard from Republicans this past week, that Democrats can't in good faith criticize Donald Trump when Joe Biden tried to unilaterally, without Congress, waive $400 billion worth of student loan debt. And when the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that, he basically shrugged and then tried to do it via piecemeal approach.
This is like comparing apples and cannonballs. What we're seeing coming from the Trump administration is executive orders uprooting and upending the federal government. And what makes this all the more galling and terrifying for a lot of people is that he has delegated a lot of power to someone who was elected to no office, to someone who was not confirmed by the Senate. He is accountable to no one except for maybe President Trump. And President Trump has already said, well, he will only do things that we want him to do. Well, so far, Elon Musk is doing everything that Donald Trump wants to do. That is what is so terrifying about this moment, is that you have an unelected person who also happens to be the wealthiest person in the world, and also the wealthiest person in the world who owns a huge social media megaphone and is able to manipulate the information that the people on that huge platform receive. That's what is so dangerous about what is happening now. And as for trying to compare President Biden's executive order on student loans and what Donald Trump is doing, Donald Trump is destroying. President Biden signed an executive order and, yeah, pushed the limits of executive action, but to the benefit of people who were drowning in student debt. He did it in order to help people, not to destroy the government that the American people depend on for a whole host of things.
Let's shift our focus back to Elon Musk for a second, because, Jonathan, we actually have the sound that you mentioned. Here is how President Trump responded to a reporter's question about whether he gave Elon Musk any red lines.
Power grab. Is there anything you've told Elon Musk he cannot touch?
Well, we haven't discussed that much. I'll tell him to go here, go there. He does it. He's got a very capable group of people. Very, very capable. They know what they're doing. They'll ask questions, and they'll see immediately as somebody gets tongue-tied that they're either crooked or don't know what they're doing.
So, Matt, it would appear that Elon Musk has a fairly broad mandate in that it's not spelled out at all. I mean, if you take into account what President Trump is saying there.
I think President Trump has told Elon Musk, let's change the government. Let's slim it down. Let's dramatically reduce the federal workforce. And if you need to go fast and break things, as they say in Silicon Valley, to do that, that's fine. I will say that if Elon Musk were the healthcare czar or the energy czar, coming up with big plans for government spending or to combat global warming, I think there'd be a lot less uproar in Washington, D.C. It's the fact that he has the goal of changing the federal government and limiting it at a time when we have record deficits and debt that I think is angering a lot of people who are invested in the current system.
In the time that remains, I want to return to this open question about the path forward for Democrats, because, Jonathan, you wrote a column for the Washington Post this past week, the thesis of which is that the Democratic Party's issue isn't rooted in policy, it's rooted in perception. Tell us more about that and whether Ken Martin, the newly elected head of the DNC, can effectively change that.
Well, the perception of the Democratic Party is it's filled with elites who only care about niche issues and don't listen to the rest of us. And as everyone knows, in a lot of instances, perception is reality. I was one of 3 people, MSNBC anchors, who hosted the last DNC forum. And there were 2 instances that happened that sort of put this perception in high relief. One was a question asking for a commitment to dedicated seats for transgender folks within the party to serve within the party in the governing structure. Another was, protesters who were loudly screaming about, climate change and getting big money out of politics, something that everyone on that stage was for. And yet no one wanted to listen to what they had to say. And what was good about those 2 moments that were instructive, Faz Shakir, a friend of PBS NewsHour, was the only person on the stage who did not raise his hand on the transgender question. It was also one on a question for seats for Muslim DNC members. He said, I don't think we should be dividing people up by identity. We should focus on people who are up for the mission and the program of the DNC and have them bring their identity to the table. He's absolutely right. And then with the protesters, Jason Paul said, this is the way people in the country view the Democratic Party, and that is our problem. That's why I say the policy isn't the problem. Democrats have policies that address the American people's issues. It's the perception. And that is what Ken Martin has to do. And we're about to find out if he's able to do it, to change that perception.
Jonathan Capehart and Matthew Continetti, thanks again for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
This Sunday in New Orleans, the Philadelphia Eagles will try to block the Kansas City Chiefs from taking home an historic 3rd consecutive Super Bowl title. There will also be an historic amount of money riding on the game. The American Gaming Association estimates that nearly $1.4 billion will be legally wagered. As Paul Salman reports, proof of a snowballing and potentially perilous sports betting craze.
I'm doing the FanDuel Kick of Destiny 3 live Super Bowl Sunday.
Super Bowl Sunday. Our eyes and ears blitzed by calls to get in on the action.
Now, I know it's the Super Bowl and all, but everyone gets a free bet?
Nearly 7 years after the Supreme Court struck down the ban on commercial sports betting, 39 states and the District of Columbia have legalized it. Last year, more than 1 in 3 Americans said they'd put money on a game at some point in their life, up from the year before, while the American Gaming Association estimates that commercial sports betting revenue reached more than $14 billion, up 28% from 2023.
And it's gotten to a point where if you're not betting on sports, people are starting to question why you're watching the game.
For 25-year-old Philadelphia resident Rob Minnick, the gambling gateway was fantasy sports, played as a teenager. The switch to sports betting, which he began on illegal and offshore sites before turning the age of 21, was all too easy.
If I was going to hang out with my friends or a family event was going to be happening, the center focal point was a professional sport of some kind. And so this idea that we could do what we were already doing, but now make money doing it, it was like way too good to be true. And, it was.
Too good because fun with friends became 6 to 8 hours a day of compulsive gambling.
Gambling was my way of expressing myself, to prove I was smart, to prove I could win, to prove that I was worthy. And the money kind of reflected the scoreboard.
After 6 years of betting, he joined Gamblers Anonymous, eventually kicking his habit 2 years ago.
I was so far into debt.
And now hosting a podcast, One Day at a Time, Gambling Awareness, talking to people like himself about their struggles.
When I started sports gambling, which is really what was my biggest vice when I was 19.
I'm going to call this an epidemic of addiction that's heading towards the United States, if not already hitting the United States. It's not because the doors opened up and you got access. It's because the doors opened up and people started pulling you through those doors.
All right, boys, who we betting on?
With the ads and come-ons that now buffet us all. Of course, gambling addiction is nothing new, but understanding how big the problem is difficult, as there's no comprehensive national data. The National Council on Problem Gambling estimates about 2.5 million Americans meet the criteria for a severe gambling problem, while another 2 to 3% have a mild or moderate problem. And recent studies found that legal sports betting decreased household savings and investments, led to more bankruptcies and loan delinquencies, even contributed to a rise in domestic violence.
I made my last bet on April 27, 2014, and on that same night nearly took my own life.
Former lawyer Harry Levant, disbarred for stealing some $2 million from client funds to fuel his gambling addiction. Now a licensed counselor and advocate for reform, Levant testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee in December.
We have known for more than 12 years that gambling is an addictive product, and gambling disorder and addiction similar to heroin, opioids, tobacco, alcohol, and cocaine.
Levant's own struggles began well before the advent of widespread legal sports betting, and he acknowledges that states now receive a cut of gambling revenues to build roads, schools, and even fund treatment, like the 1-800-GAMBLER helplines tagging those ads you see everywhere. And so,
I'm sympathetic to the need of our elected officials to balance budgets. But what has happened here is they have no recognition, or very little recognition, of the product the gambling industry and its sports and media partners have rolled out.
This is you, and this is your powerful hunch.
He's pointing to the boom in offerings since the ban was lifted.
With FanDuel, it's easier than ever to
proposition bets, wagers on the first player to score a touchdown at the Super Bowl, the length of the national anthem there, whether Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce get engaged.
BetMGM's got all the sports betting in one place, and it's live, baby.
There's live betting, which turns every moment of every game into a betting opportunity, and with AI constantly adjusting the odds.
You have the power to create your perfect parlay any way you want.
And there are parlays, which string together multiple bets, giving winners potentially sky-high payouts, but stacking the deck hugely in favor of the house. A fact that's not advertised.
We'll take an 18 again. Yeah. We'll get our money back.
Finally, live streaming on both legal and offshore sites, and featuring influencers like mega rapper Drake.
You won $20,000. Congratulations, man.
Who's paid to play and lure in new players. All the while, the sports books harvest data from users, gaining insight into how to keep customers coming back.
I like to say it this way. When the first cave person invented the first wheel, there was some schmuck 3 caves down laying 3 to 1, the wheel wouldn't work. Gambling's been around a very long time. It's not going anywhere. But this is a fundamentally new, different, defective, and dangerous online product.
Last year, Senator Richard Blumenthal and Representative Andrea Salinas, both Democrats, introduced the Gambling Recovery Investment and Treatment Act to fund treatment and also research. 5 states with some form of legal gambling currently offer no funding at all for the treatment. And in September, Blumenthal joined Democratic Representative Paul Tonko of New York to propose the Safe Bet Act to limit TV ads, restrict the number and the type of bets, ban AI use to track players' habits, and create micro-bets, among other things.
Every other addictive product, government regulates the advertising, promotion, distribution, and consumption.
Sitting just behind Harry Levant at that Senate hearing in December was the American Gaming Association's Joe Maloney. The AGA says federal regulation not only isn't necessary, it will actually make things worse.
The advancements in technology are just going to continue to take place. They're just not going to take place in the legal regulated market.
This is the key to the legal industry's argument, that it's taking the action away from illegal gambling, with its loan sharks, kneecappers, and unregulated offshore markets that teenagers like Rob Minnick used. So, for example, in 2022, in Texas and California, which haven't legalized sports betting, the AGA says players spent more than $600 million in illegal markets.
Where they're prey to deceptive consumer practices, where there's no promotion of responsibility whatsoever, and there's zero taxes being remitted back into the state for the purposes of providing accessible clinical support for those demonstrating problematic activity or any other priority that they might deem those monies to go to.
The Safe Bet Act is expected to be reintroduced in this Congress, although both Rob Minnick and Harry Levant agree the legal gambling genie is out of the bottle.
Encourage people to become more aware of what is happening and understand there are serious risks involved and become part of the conversation to bring public health reform, not to prevent people from enjoying gambling, but to prevent an industry and its partners from preying on the public. And with that, I wish people who are gambling on the Super Bowl for recreational reasons, I wish them well with their bets. Enjoy the game. I'm in Philadelphia right now. I need to say go Birds.
For the uninitiated, those birds would be the Eagles, and for you all and the PBS NewsHour, Paul Solman in Boston.
As the Chinese New Year celebration continues this month, we bring you a brief but spectacular take from Lawrence Chu, the heart and soul behind Chef Chu's, a beloved dining destination in the Bay Area for over 5 decades.
Known for his culinary artistry and commitment to community, Chef Chu reflects on the power of food to bring people together. Here he is in his own words.
So many people ask Chef Chu, when are you going to retire? Are you going to slow down? Are you kidding me? Before I came to America, my father told me that America is a vast country, rich in land, product, and opportunity. It's a country where a person can have a dream. With a lot of hard work, with a little bit of luck, your dream can come true. I truly believe that. I come here in 1963, and I see, wow, this is America. I've been dreaming for years. Finally, I arrived. I'm living in San Francisco, Chinatown. The cable car go up the hill. I can't believe it. Every morning, I can feel it's like an earthquake when the cable car went through. I love San Francisco. I was so lucky. The third day I arrived in San Francisco, I able to find a job at Trader Vic's. They immediately gave me a busboy job. From the busboy job, I learned a lot. The Chef Chu opened a restaurant in 1969 December because I met my future wife. I want to impress her. I told her I have a dream. I want to open Chinese fast food restaurant in America at the corner. And I want you to help me. She said no. But if we only find one good location, have a one restaurant, I will help you. That's how we started a restaurant. And a few months later, I found a location in the 1067 North San Antonio Road, Los Altos. The idea is serving the comfort food for comfortable price. In a Chef Chu Chinese restaurant, our motto is treat each day like a grand opening day. The difference between Chinese cooking and American cooking, Italian cooking, Japanese cooking, we oftentimes use a wok. The good thing is that sometimes even you make a mistake, they come with something so good, everybody talk about, oh, Chef Chu, what that dish it is. My father definitely is a role model for me. He is the one to talk about a family value. Emphasize that Sunday night, have dinner together. Before you finish the dinner, I already started to talk about the next Sunday, what we're going to eat. My wife is my inspirator, motivator. She knows what is real life. I have a dream, but she knows dream just a dream. And this is America. Yeah, you have to make the money the old-fashioned way. You have to earn it. Now today, I'm 81. I'm still enjoying what I'm doing. I was never can imagine I can reach in this level in my life. The most I'm proud of is as all my children respect me. I have a sense of achievement, sense of accomplishment, above all, the sense of authority in Chinese cooking. So I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here. I'm waiting for you to come in. My name is Lawrence Chu. People call me Chef Chu. And this is my brief but spectacular take on treating each day like a grand opening day.
We got to go to Chef Chu's. And you can watch more brief but spectacular videos online at pbs.org/newshour/brief.
And a news update before we go now. President Trump said on social media this evening that he will immediately revoke former President Biden's security clearance and will also end his intelligence briefings.
The ability to receive intelligence briefings after office is a courtesy extended to past presidents for decades. Mr. Trump noted a similar action back in 2021 when then President Biden said there was no need for Mr. Trump to get briefings, citing his erratic behavior. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On behalf of the entire NewsHour team, thank you for joining us and have a great weekend.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Kathy and Paul Anderson, and Camilla and George Smith. The Walton Family Foundation, working for solutions to protect water during climate change so people and nature can thrive together. The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, for more than 50 years advancing ideas and supporting institutions to promote a better world at hewlett.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.